Hey there, my people, and welcome. I'm excited to share a top 10 favorite of mine, and that's the movie titled The Stranger. Not only is this movie directed by the late great Orson Welles, he also portrays the lead character, Nazi fugitive Franz Kindler, who's now living in the small town of Harper, Connecticut, under the guise of Professor Charles Rankin. His wife Mary is played by Loretta Young, and Mary is the daughter of a Supreme Court justice. This little idyllic life of Charles and Mary start to shake and crumble with the arrival of a stranger, played brilliantly by the stellar actor Edward G. Robinson. He plays Mr. Wilson, a Nazi hunter who's been on the trail for Kindler for some time, going from country to country looking for this dude and any other Nazis that he comes across. Ultimately, his following one Nazi leads him to Harper, Connecticut. Now, my peeps, get this. This really isn't a movie about Germany and Nazis or hunting down Nazis, really. Oh no, it's much more than that. This is a suspenseful cat and mouse, hide and seek, how will I ultimately trip you up and get you, or how will I ultimately escape you type of movie. It's a masterfully told story of what happens when the lies start to unravel and what an individual will do to keep their secrets from seeing the light of day. Well, my peeps, that's the intro. Are you ready? Then let the movie begin. The movie begins at the Allied War Crimes Commission's office in London, England. Mr. Wilson is speaking with a group of men and he sounds as if he's done. He's had it. Now desperate times call for desperate measures.
Leave the cell door open. Let him escape.
In my view, it's all very irregular. It might entail the most embarrassing repercussions.
Hang the repercussions and the responsibility. If I fail, I am responsible.
Again, this dude is done. He wants Franz Kindler. And the only way he can see to get this dude is to let one of his right-hand men escape the jail. Then they'll follow this guy with the hope that he'll lead them to Franz. He says that this is their only chance. He's telling this room full of guys that they can sentence him to the bottomless pit of hell, and he would still insist they let this guy go. He tells these guys that this insanity must be destroyed, and he slams his pipe on the table for emphasis, breaking it. This dude is all up in his feelings. I don't know if he's tired of chasing Nazis. Maybe he's been chasing them for years upon years. Or, as I suspect, this one dude, Kindler, is some type of head honcho. And he wants this head dude. Maybe all along the way, he's been capturing these lesser dudes. And now, you know what? He's just fixated. And he wants to catch the big fish. And so he says, let a littler fish go. Let's set a trap. And ultimately, they agree. So they let this right-hand guy go. A lesser fish, but a fish that was close to Kindler. And the guy does exactly what they hoped. He leaves England for the United States. He's nervous now because the boat is docking and he knows he'll have to pass through customs. So he's walking and practicing his little speech, which is kind of suspicious, but okay, I kind of get it too.
I'm traveling for my health.
Tengan listos sus pasaportes. Get your passports ready.
I'm traveling for my health.
So this guy is walking and repeating his little line under his breath, looking around nervously as he approaches the customs table, his passport in hand. And his little line on the tip of his tongue.
Your business in this country, senora?
I'm joining my husband.
Next, please.
Your business in this country, senor.
I'm traveling for my health. How?
The dude barely whispers it out, and the one customs guy hands him off to the dude standing next to him. Then you notice something. You notice the custom guy move around the other side of the table where he's standing now fairly close to the Nazi dude. The custom guy looks up as if signaling to the man and the woman that are standing together above them on another tier. You notice the man has a pipe in his hand, so we know that pipe is fairly familiar. We can guess who that is. And he's standing at a railing with a woman. He says something to the woman and makes a motion, and the woman turns and walks away. We can pretty much assume that she's going to be following this Nazi dude. This chick's pretty good. She's ducking around a couple of corners, not once getting spotted by the guy. She's still following him close, but not too close. And maybe this guy is so focused on his destination that he's not being very cautious. Dang! They even got somebody watching from a window. He's watching this guy from the window, and then he gets on the phone. Dude, they got you 12 ways from Sunday up in here. So the guy who's making the phone call is the husband of the chick who's trailing the Nazi dude. And he's calling Wilson on the phone. As you can see, Wilson is in his hotel room reading, and it looks like he's got a couple of books on clocks. He answers the phone, and the husband tells him that they figure he's going to a photographer to get a passport photo taken and to get additional instructions.
Hold it. I wish to know the whereabouts of Franz Kindler. There is no Franz Kindler. Franz Kindler is dead and cremated.
Okay, well, that was abrupt. And look at the terrified look on the photographer's face. He hurriedly tells the Nazi dude that Franz Kindler is gone and cremated. The Nazi dude gets all up in the photographer's face. Y'all, he don't seem so timid now. Really, the opposite. Where's this coming from? This dude is menacing and threatening. He doesn't believe that Kindler is gone and cremated, and he tells the guy this. And then he says to the dude, "This is a command."
It's a command! I have a message for Franz Kindler from the All Highest. It is forbidden. I command you in the name of that authority.
Okay, peeps, all I'm hearing from this guy is Old Spice, and I know that's not it. But I think we can safely assume that this old heist has to be some existing powerful Nazi group, underground Nazi group. Whatever it is has the photographer guy terrified, like he don't want to have nothing to do with this group. The photographer doesn't say anything. He simply turns and opens a big album that's sitting on a table. It's an album that apparently only has postcards in it. And he hands one of the cards to the Nazi guy. There's no name on the card, no message on the card. It simply reads Harper, Connecticut. And so we can all assume that Franz Kindler is in Connecticut. So we see that the Nazi has arrived by bus to Harper, Connecticut. The bus driver announces they're in Harper, and the guy stands to get his suitcase from the overhang. As he does so, we see another set of hands reaching up as well, and we see a pipe fall onto the seat. So it would appear that this pipe is going to be some type of a bit through this movie, meaning it will likely be that something that announces Wilson in some cases before we actually see him. The Nazi looks at the pipe and he furrows his brow and then cuts his eyes to the side where the pipe fell from. It's almost as if he recognizes the pipe or that there's something familiar about this pipe.
Excuse me.
So the Nazi gets off the bus and rushes into what appears to be a combination bus stop, convenience, drugstore. We see and hear small town life going on inside. The proprietor listening to and laughing at the radio. 3 college kids sitting at a nearby table just talking and kicking it. And we've got this Nazi who's come in and he's just standing there looking for Wilson through the window. While the store owner, Mr. Potter, is chatting up Wilson, the Nazi is edging towards the telephone booth. Yet Wilson, the Nazi chaser, is eyeing this guy through the window, and he's not missing a beat.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We sell about everything here.
The Nazi picks up the telephone book and flips through the pages. Before he stops, scans the page, and apparently finds the address he's looking for. While outside, we see Wilson take one long last look toward the phone booth before he turns and heads down the street. Now, leaving the phone booth, the Nazi approaches Potter, placing his suitcase on the counter. He asks Potter if he could leave his suitcase there. Potter tells him yes, but he assumes no responsibility for it, and he directs him to put the suitcase on the shelf behind him. While the Nazi is storing the suitcase, Wilson returns and spots him. Wilson asks Potter what's the best hotel in town, and Potter directs him to Miss Peabody's place. You notice that while Potter is directing Wilson to Miss Peabody's place, Wilson is peeping through the window, not taking his eyes off the Nazi. The Nazi leaves, casting a glance in Wilson's direction, only to find Wilson looking at him. The Nazi walks hurriedly away, with Wilson walking right behind him. Okay, you know what? All this Nazi is doing is shooting out red flags. He is so obviously trying to hide from somebody. He keeps looking around. He keeps looking at Wilson. When he looks at Wilson, Wilson is looking at him. You know what? If I'm this dude trying to hide from folk, the last thing I'm going to be doing is constantly making eye contact. And then what does he do when he leaves the store? He is walking away so fast as if somebody's chasing him, and Wilson is just standing on the side of the street. And this guy is casting looks and racing off down the street, almost as if he's begging Wilson to chase after him, which Wilson, just moseying quite along, does. The Nazi runs to the boys' school, finds an open door, and ducks inside, followed by Wilson. Now the chase has gone from playing cat and mouse to playing hide and seek. Now here's the hinky part of this, y'all, and that's the fact that the Nazi has had time to get in there and hide. However, Wilson will not be deterred. Him and his ever-present pipe is gonna find this dude. Now, the Nazi, he has his own mindset, and that is to evade capture any way possible. And we can see, peeps, that he is ready to do some stuff to Wilson because he's trying to pull that axe down. Lucky for Wilson, he can't really get it to come down, and he gives up. And he continues to try to evade Wilson. We've got Wilson peeping around what looks to be the gymnasium. The place is empty and dark, making this whole scene all the more eerie and dangerous as far as I'm concerned. Yet, Brother Man is smoking that ever-present pipe, because we can see that smoke, which I find to be some kind of cool. I mean, Wilson is tight. That brother is into his job, his reality. Brother Man is methodical. He is fearless. He a bloodhound. He's relentless. He's all of it. And because he's all of this stuff, he takes chances even in the dark because he feels the rightness of his purpose. And that's why I'm rooting for him. He's all about his focus, his duty, his purpose. He's listening for this Nazi. Then he steps out onto the gym floor, listening and looking around. Now, while Wilson's on the gym floor, the Nazi is above him on the walkway. Okay, Brother Man down, y'all, with his pipe beside him. The Nazi watches him for a moment, and seeing that he's not moving, he assumes, I guess, that the deed is done. And so he leaves. Next, we see the Nazi walking purposefully and briskly down the street. He's looking at the houses, checking them out, I assume, looking at the addresses. He apparently has now found the address. It's the house where there's a woman standing on a small ladder putting up curtains, and she spots him as he walks briskly by. The guy walks up onto the porch and knocks on the door. The woman opens the door, and this dude all but bum rushes himself inside this chick's home.
I may come in?
Yes, of course.
Does Mr. Charles Rankin live here?
Yes, he does, but he isn't here right now.
So, as you can probably see, it's a kindler and much gentler time in this movie, probably around the 1950s. So everybody is a lot nicer to everybody else. The way this dude just bum rushed himself in the house, and she's not screaming her head off. So he asks her if Rankin is expected soon, and she tells him yes, in a few minutes. And then it's like he remembers finally his manners, and he removes his hat, and he asks her if he can just wait there. She seems a little hesitant and slow to answer at first, but then she says yes, though she casts a glance at the door, perhaps feeling a moment of unease. She tells him that he can have a seat, and then she tries to indulge him in some small talk. She asks him if he's a friend of Mr. Rankin, to which he responds yes, and nothing more. She introduces herself, telling him she's Mary Longstreet, and then she pauses a moment, because the polite thing to do would be for him to, in response, introduce himself. And she waits a long minute, but he says nothing. She looks out the window and glances at her watch. Her former unease may be ticking up a notch or two. And to break the silence, she tells him that Mr. Rankin ought to be there now. Still no response from him. and she adds that sometimes he stays after his last class, but he'll come straight home today because today is their wedding day. And that seems to perk up Mr. Silent Man because he says, "You're getting married?"
You're getting married?
Yes, at 6 o'clock. I know it's most unconventional, my being here today, but I want to get these curtains up.
So the guy seems to consider this and decides it might be better if he left. He asks Mary the way Rankin takes when he's coming home, and she tells him from Webster Hall. She pulls back the curtains and points the building out to him. He thanks her and rushes off. As he's leaving, Mary asks, "Who shall I say call?" But he shuts the door on her mid-sentence, and he's gone. Isn't it funny how you can be walking down the street, minding your own little business with nary a care in the world, when out of nowhere, your past catches up to you?
Franz. It's hi, Franz.
Heineke, we mustn't be seen talking together. Go back to the church, into the woods, you follow the path. I'll meet you there.
Rankin is standing there like a statue. He didn't even turn his head, but he's darting his eyes around, seeing if anyone saw Meineke. And just as Meineke is walking out of sight, a group of college kids appear and they stop and chat with Rankin. Rankin asks the boys what they're up to, and they tell him a paper chase. There's the one guy with a handful of strips of paper, and he's the one who lays out the trail for the others to follow. He's given a head start, and he tosses the strips of paper on the ground as he runs away. After the head start has elapsed, the others give chase by following the paper trail.
You ought to go with us, Mr. Rankin.
Where to?
The woods.
Well, I'd like to. I'm afraid I have a couple of things to attend to.
Well, join us later. We'll be out till dark.
So now these kids have added on to Rankin's problems. He sent Meineke into the woods, and the boys will be running around in the very same woods. The boys make their goodbyes, and they take off, while the ever-cautious Rankin is looking around to see if they've been observed. Now we see the one kid running and laying out the paper trail, and the others are running some distance behind as they follow the trail the first guy has left for them. Then there's Rankin and Meineke meeting in a clearing. Rankin is open and accepting, and the men embrace like long-lost comrades. As they're talking, Rankin hears the boys and sees them running through the trees. When Rankin tells Meineke he looks the same, Meineke tells him that he's changed. He's a different man than he was before. Rankin says that he too is different as he leads Meineke from the open area and into the cover of the trees.
Conrad, you know how I gathered and destroyed every single item in Germany and Poland that might have served as a clue to my identity. Well, guess what I'll be doing at 6 o'clock tonight?
He tells Meineke that he'll be standing before a minister of the gospel with a woman's hands in his, the daughter of a justice of the United States Supreme Court, a famous liberal. And he adds that the girl's even good to look at. Yes, he says, the camouflage is perfect. And he adds, who'd think to look for the notorious Franz Kindler in the sacred precinct of the Harper School, surrounded by the sons of America's first families of state, hidden until the day we strike again. In reality, he's just bringing this dude up to speed and showing how over X amount of years that we don't know how long he's been hiding out here in Harper, this dude has not only ingrained himself into this community, because he's marrying the daughter of a U.S. Supreme Court justice. So he's seriously ingrained. He is teaching what he says are the sons of America's first families of state. So you're probably talking about what, congressmen, senators, future presidents and vice presidents? Lord only knows what he is teaching these kids. And what does he say? Hidden until the day we strike again. Hidden, folks. Hidden, my people. In plain sight. And I'm going to tell you something. This is the worst of it. This dude isn't in a hovel in a hole thinking that Nazi chaser is going to ultimately hunt him up and find him. You know, that was Meineke running around like a scared little pup. This dude, he all the way out in the open, which lets you know one or two things. He has got his cover so deep undercover, and he is such a high-ranking Nazi dude that, oh no, there is no fear in him whatsoever, and that fatherland is going to rise again. And he's just going to plot and plan until that comes around.
The day when we strike again.
There will be another war?
Of course.
You hear how matter of fact he is about this. Of course, he says. Like it's the most normalest, naturalist thing to think, believe, and then say out loud. But remember when Meineke said he had changed? Well, he has. And this is how.
War is an abomination, saith the Lord. It is to tell you this that I am here. He set me free that I might come here and tell.
Who set you free?
God.
Now you notice how Rankin seems to be ignoring Meineke as they walk along, as if he's simply just rambling on until he hears Meineke say this. He set me free. Then Rankin grabs him and demands, who set you free? Like his being there might be a trap, well, which it sort of kind of is. But Meineke isn't talking about human freedom, but spiritual freedom. And Rankin's response is to laugh at him. Meineke tells him that he's a new man. He says all doors were open to him, and he says it was one of God's miracles. So, okay, y'all, I'm assuming he's talking about the commission allowing him to escape so they can follow him and find this head Nazi dude living undercover, hiding in plain sight. Yet, Meineke sees it as a miracle from God. But now, Rankin's not laughing. He's thinking. This dude didn't get to where he was hiding out for years by not thinking, analyzing, or questioning. This dude has built an entire spick and span life, and he didn't do it by being careless, blowing stuff off or poo-pooing stuff. Oh, now his eyes are looking around, and how the wheels in his head are turning.
They freed you, so you'd lead them to me. Have you been followed? Were you followed here?
Yes, he even smoked a pipe, and I killed him.
Rankin figures it out, and he voices his conclusion. They freed you, he says, so you could lead them to me. Meineke assures him that he'd been followed by a guy with a pipe, but he offed him. Meineke, who's had a spiritual awakening and is this changed man now, starts praying. And Rankin asks him again, you off the guy with the pipe, right? To which Meineke responds, yes. Looking around, Rankin says, no one else followed you? And Meineke responds with the shake of his head, no. Rankin, all the time, is leading this guy deeper and deeper into the woods. Look at his eyes, peeps. He's thinking, y'all, best laid plans. Best laid plans. Remember him saying this earlier? That he destroyed all evidence of him and his existence. Save this one. And that's this dude he's walking deeper and deeper and deeper into the woods with. This dude is plotting. You can look at his face, his eyes. You could see the wheels again turning in his mind. He is plotting and planning. And Meineke, like a little lamb being led to slaughter, is just walking right along with him. Eventually, he pulls out his Bible and tells Rankin that he must be led to salvation. Look, this dude's only salvation that he looking at is off in you. And poor Meineke, he thinks that this is the real reason why he's there. So he can help Rankin get to salvation and atone for all this Nazi wrong that he did. So that he too could have this same religious experience. The same experience that Meineke himself has had. Rankin has no such thoughts, people. The only salvation he's concerned with is staying hidden and eradicating and doing away with anything that might threaten that freedom. Meineke tells Rankin to kneel down with him, and Meineke starts praying. Rankin is looking around, peeps. He's looking. He's listening. He figures he's far enough away to do his little dastardly deed. And Meineke tells Rankin to repeat after him.
How could I ever have a... Oh, goodness.
As Rankin has finished choking out Meineke, he hears the sounds of the boys running around the woods. As the boys' voices get louder, Rankin ducks behind the bush, and the kid who's throwing the strips of paper races right by. This kid literally runs right by the very bush Rankin is hiding behind, dropping strips of the paper for the others to find. Once the kid is out of sight, Rankin stands and drags Meineke to a denser area, and he tosses dirt, leaves, and brush on top of Meineke's body. All the time, he's looking around. This dude is calculating as heck. Even though this hiccup showed up out of nowhere, or no, he wasn't going to get thrown off of his personal reality of hiding in plain sight. He was going to adapt and deal with it in the moment. This is how deep this dude is. Then he gets up, and what does he do? He is collecting all the strips of paper the first kid laid out. All of them. He's picking them all up, and then what he does is he goes to a spot where there's a fork in this road. What he does then is he tosses out the paper to lead the kids down the fork in the opposite direction, leading the boys away from the spot where Meineke is hidden. As he's tossing the strips of paper around, he hears the boys. What he does now is to race back to Meineke, and the boys who have now come upon this spot are following the false trail of paper that Rankin has left for them. Okay, y'all, this dude is cold. He is cold-blooded. He just off the dude. And here we are a couple of hours later, and this dude's getting married. If you will remember, he's marrying a Supreme Court justice's daughter, and as calculating as this guy is, I would have to believe that this is a part of some nefarious plan of his. A plan to position himself in a place of power that ultimately will have a villainous end. This is just me talking. It's not a part of the plot point of this movie. However, I cannot believe he just marrying this chick just because he fell in love with this chick. I don't think he loved nobody except for himself and his cause. Well, now, while the marriage is happening, check out what's going on over at the school. Well, as we can see, Wilson is yet in the land of the living, albeit with a big old goose egg on the side of his head. We see Wilson leaving the school and heading over to the store. Once inside, he glances through the window at the church, noticing all the parked cars. He asks Potter if there's a wedding going on, and Potter tells him it's Judge Longstreet's daughter, adding that Longstreet is the Supreme Court Justice. Wilson asks for a bottle of aspirin since he got that big old goose egg on his head, and Potter points to where the aspirin is located, telling Wilson that he has to get it himself. Potter asks him if he's living down at Miss Peabody's place, and Wilson tells him for just a few days. Wilson gets himself a cup of coffee and asks who the judge's daughter is marrying. One of the kids at the counter tells him that she's marrying a teacher from their school, a stranger in town. Now, Peach, you gotta understand what small town folk mean when they call somebody a stranger. This dude Rankin could have lived there for 10 years and still be seen and spoken of as a stranger. This is just how some small town people talk. You're either homegrown or you're a stranger. Wilson sits down to play a game of checkers with Potter, who really takes playing checkers seriously because he put this cap thing on his head. And so I don't know what that means, if it's supposed to give him some kind of special checker power or something. And then the pair decides to play for a quarter, which to Mr. Wilson, those are kind of stiff stakes, but I'm not a checker player, so I can't speak on that. So as they play checkers, they're just kind of doing this little small talk thing.
You're on business? Mm-hmm. Selling something? Buying. Oh, antique dealer.
Now Wilson, who could use a cover anyway, allows Potter to think he's an antique buyer. Potter tells him that all the good buyers come to Harper, and he tells Wilson that Judge Longstreet has the best antique collection in these parts, but he wouldn't sell any of his pieces. Wilson asks him if he's aware of any other out-of-town buyers, and Potter tells him that a guy came in just that morning on the same bus Wilson came in on, and that he left his suitcase there, and he never came back for it. Potter tells Wilson he was only there for a minute. He went over to the phone booth, looked in the phone book, and he left. Now, while back at the wedding reception, Mary is walking around looking for her husband. She asks her dad and her brother if they've seen him, and they tease her that she's lost her husband already. Then the family dog enters the picture, jumping up on the trio. The three of them are smiling, not the least bit put out by the dog's behavior. Mary gives the dog a couple of pats on the head. Then she tells him to go find Charles. Well, peeps, it looks like Rankin has doubled back to the scene of the crime with a shovel so he could properly hide the body. After he's finished burying Meineke, he sweeps leaves and brush over the ground to camouflage the freshly dug grave. And all this time, Mary is back at her reception, and her husband isn't there. Not only is he not there, he hasn't been there for a minute. He just up and disappeared. There is no telling what half of her guests are thinking. Her brother comes in and tells her he's looked everywhere and he can't find Charles. She says she wonders where he could be. She's getting worried, and before the words are fully out of her mouth, he shows up, much to Mary's relief. She notices that he's changed, and he says to her, shouldn't she change as well because they're supposed to be going on a honeymoon? She's all elated and happy and tickled pink, and I think really, really relieved. She gives him a quick kiss and rushes off to change. Now, while that's going on, Wilson is conducting his undercover investigation. He's compiled a list of guys who've shown up there in Harper in the last 12 months. Rankin's name is last on this list. You know something, peeps? This dude has moved fast. Within a year, he has a teaching job at the most prestigious high school in this town, and he's met, wooed, engaged, and now married the most eligible woman in town, the daughter of a Supreme Court justice. As calculating as Rankin is, you can't tell me this isn't all a part of some bigger plot and plan. Now we see Wilson focusing his attention out the window. After witnessing the strange goings-on with the town clock, Wilson goes over to investigate. He enters the clock tower and climbs the stairs, climbing onto the landing, and it's there that he meets Mary's brother, Noir. Noah tells Wilson he was simply cleaning around the clock, not fixing or repairing it. He tells Wilson it's his brother-in-law who's actually going to do the repair work on the clock, but he's on his honeymoon right now. He tells Wilson that his brother-in-law and sister will be back on Friday because his brother-in-law is a teacher and he has to be back for exams. And then Noah tells Wilson his brother-in-law's name, Charles Rankin, the last name on Wilson's list. Now, peeps, don't fool yourself. Wilson is just as calculating and methodical as Rankin. Remember, it was his idea to let Meineke escape in the first place, hoping he'd lead them to Franz Kindler. And he has. He led them to this small town, Harper, Connecticut. And if Wilson doesn't know anything else, he knows Kindler is somewhere in this town. He's going to hang around, and by process of elimination, he's going to find this dude. Next, we find Wilson at Justice Longstreet's home on the very day Mary and Rankin are slated to return home from their honeymoon. Wilson's looking at an antique and chatting the judge up like he actually knows something about silver. Just as they're talking, the door opens and in comes the newlyweds. Mary kisses her brother Noah and her dad introduces her to Wilson, and he introduces Wilson to Rankin as well. The servant Clara comes in and gives Mary a huge loving hug. Then Clara tells everyone to sit and eat before the food gets cold. Mary tells Wilson to stay and have dinner with them, and everyone takes their places. They're sitting around and chatting the way people do around a dinner table, chatting about this and that, religion and politics, but hear this and catch Rankin's expressions.
Mr. Wilson is also an authority on clocks.
Oh, really? That's Charles' hobby, too.
Notice how Rankin hesitates just the slightest second. Now see this.
Have you been at Harper long, Mr. Wilson?
Since Friday, a week ago.
You lost a day. I patched you up on Friday. You were hurt on Thursday, remember? The day of the wedding.
And Rankin hesitates again, ever so slightly. Those wheels are turning, peeps. They're turning and they're spinning and they're thinking. Last Thursday. It was last Thursday that Meineke showed up out of the blue. The day Meineke told him he'd been followed, but he took care of the guy. And the day Rankin took care of him and buried him out in the woods. Now, come on, peeps. Do we actually think Rankin believes in coincidences? Not hardly. Mary and Rankin arrives at their own home. Mary remarks that it's extraordinary that clocks are Mr. Wilson's hobby too. And Rankin replies yes, but he has that Rankin look on his face, folks. Red the dog is there, and Rankin tells Mary he's taking Red for a walk. Mary tells him that he doesn't have to go with Red, just let him out, he won't run off. Rankin tells her he wants to walk, he's feeling a bit restless. Rankin is headed for the woods with the dog in tow. He gets to the spot where he's buried Meineke, and the ground is undisturbed. Rankin all but breathes a sigh of relief. He takes a sit in the dirt, smokes a cigarette, and once he's done with the cigarette, he stands and starts to walk off back toward the house. As he's walking, he's calling for the dog, but the dog is ignoring him. The dog has walked up on the spot where Meineke is buried, and he's sniffing around it. Rankin walks back to see what's keeping the dog. And this is what he finds, people. That dog is digging in the dirt. He is digging in the very spot where Meineke is buried. And I mean, he's digging good, with both paws going to town. Those of you who have dogs know what I mean. Dogs got different type of digging. It's the slow dig, it's the medium dig, and then dogs have that, I know something is here and I want to get to a dig. And that is their full speed, two paws going to town digging. Dude, now you've got a problem. I've had dogs most of my life. And the one thing with dogs is, once they start digging, it's hard to get them to stop. Thus the saying, like a dog with a bone. Red the dog smells something, and he won't stop until he's unearthed it. Rankin knows he's got a problem, and he's chasing Red, trying to get him to stop. But Red runs from him and heads right back to the spot, like a dog with a bone. You know what? I know this dude didn't just kick that dog. Well, this is a hot mess now for Red, cause he's just being his dog self. But brother dog, sadly, I think your days are numbered, cause you're not gonna be able to help yourself. Every time you let out, you're going to aim straight for the woods in that grave. And this punk Rankin knows that. He knows the behavior of a dog. Everybody who's owned a dog, been near a dog, lived in the same environment of a dog knows that certain stuff you can train out. And digging is one of them. However, it's that bone thing. Once that dude got that bone, he's not going to be able to let go of it. And Red, brother dog, you ain't going to be able to help yourself. You're going to aim straight for that mound of dirt. And this punk Rankin knows that. I feel for you, boy. I feel for you, dude. I feel for you, dog, dude. I feel for you. And I'm going to tell you something about this punk Rankin. He has everybody fandangled. Food. He got this whole town fooled. Because you know what? This is what my mom said. If you want to test out a dude, making sure he's the right one for you, a good dude for you, you watch two things. You don't even have to ask him nothing. You just watch these two things. Number one, how he treats his mama, and number two, how he treats his dog. And that is going to tell you the type of man he is. Poor Red. It's a bit late when Rankin returns home, and Mary is already in bed asleep. Rankin creeps into the bedroom. It's almost menacingly how he's doing it. He's creeping and being creepy at it, while Mary seems to be tossing and turning. Then Rankin is standing over her when he startles her awake. Mary laughs it off and tells him she was dreaming about that little man. Rankin asks, "What little man?" Mary says, "I told you about him. He came here the day we were married. Oh crap, girlfriend. I think you finna mess up now. Mary continues by saying she never had a dream like that, and she describes the dream to him. She says the little man was walking all by himself across a deserted city square. Wherever he moved, he threw a shadow. But when he moved away, the shadow stayed there. Oh crap, behind him. That sounds prophetic, y'all. Then she sorta laughs it off. Just a bad dream, that's all, Rankin tells her. She's just overly tired. Then Mary hears this sound, and you guys know it. It's that kind of dog cry sound. And she says, hey, that's Red. And she moves to get out of bed when Rankin tells her that he put him in the cellar. And that's where he'll be sleeping at night. And during the day, he'll be leashed up. Mary says, Red's never been locked up or leashed in his whole life. And Rankin tells her that Red needs to be trained. And then Mary says this, but Red is my dog. And Rankin tells her that he knows best. And I guess the conversation is over because he kind of walks off. And I guess getting ready for bed. Now you know what? How you think you know best about my dang on dog? You been in town what? A year, dude? I have had this dog since he was a little pup. How you gonna run my dog? Well, I guess the bigger question, folks, is how you gonna run me? Well, I guess this honeymoon's over. Apparently it's the night of restless souls because over at Miss Peabody's place, Wilson sits up in bed out of his sleep. He remembers something that was said at the dinner over at Mary's dad's house. He's remembering something Rankin said.
Give me long distance. I want Washington, D.C.
Well, who but a Nazi would deny that Karl Marx was a German because he was a Jew? I think I'll stick around for a while.
And that's all it took, peeps. A seemingly innocent comment at a table of academic and learned men. The comment being that Marx could not have been German because he was a Jew. Not that Marx was a German Jew, but that he was no German at all. And Wilson says only a Nazi would ascribe to that train of thought. Alrighty now, let the games begin. The following day finds Wilson at the general store. He sits down for a game of checkers with Mr. Potter. However, he seems more interested in looking out the window at the clock tower across the street. Rankin is there, working on the clock trying to fix it. Listening to Potter, it's something he does on a regular, if not daily, basis. As they're playing checkers, Wilson looks up at Meineke's suitcase on the shelf behind Potter. Seeing him look up there, Potter turns to look up there too. Potter says it's strange that the little man never did come back to pick up his suitcase. They call him Little Man because he never told anyone there his name. Potter says he's been tempted to look inside. Wilson tells him under the circumstances he has a right to look inside, and so Potter does, happy to have Wilson there as a witness. They find nothing exciting in the suitcase other than clothes and some religious pamphlets. Just as Potter is putting the things away, Rankin and Mary come in. Potter is moving the suitcase to the back of the store, and Wilson tells Rankin and Mary they've been poking through the man's things. With Potter adding, it's been almost 2 weeks now. Mary asks, did the owner of the suitcase tell him what he was doing in Harper? And Potter says no. He simply looked at the phone book and left. Potter says he was a scrawny little fella.
Scrawny little fella with big, starry blue eyes. Had a queer walk. Like any second, he might break into a run.
Did he have a foreign accent?
Why, Well, yes, he did. Not so much of an accident.
Rankin grabs Mary's wrist to stop her from saying anything more, but Eagle Eye Wilson didn't miss a thing. Oh, he caught that, as well as Mary's facial expression at this dude snatching her by the wrist like that. Wilson asked Mary if she knew who this guy could be. No, Mary says. She was just adding to the mystery. And she tries to laugh it off while saying, "Don't all strangers have foreign accents?" "Yeah, buddy, this on." Wilson got you. He got you, dude. He's got Rankin, and he just caught Mary in a lie. He knows she lied. This dude ain't for play. He's an investigator. He's been running down lying, hiding Nazis for years. Oh no, he on top of this. And as for Rankin, he on top too, because he hasn't taken his eyes off of Wilson, giving Wilson that Rankin stare of his, that Rankin, wheels turning in the head, I'm thinking, plotting, planning, not missing a beat stare. Now, Noah, Mary's brother, comes in to break the tension. And he asks Mary if she's seen Red. And she tells him no, not since she dropped Red off at his house a couple of days ago. Well, it sounds like Red's been hanging with the brother. Red's been living with the brother. I guess Mary couldn't deal with her dog being shut up in a doggone cellar and on a leash. That chick loved her dog. Now, Noah says that Red has been spending all of his time in the woods. He doesn't even come home for some of his meals. Rankin turns to Mary and says to her, "I thought you said he never ran away." And Noah pipes up and says, "Well, he never did." And Mary asks, "Well, why do you think Noah's so anxious?" Rankin says to Mary, "Let's go," and they turn to leave, with Wilson having watched this whole exchange, watching and smoking that pipe of his. The pier is across the street at the clock tower, and Rankin is explaining himself to Mary, because it is no way she missed all that weirdness that was going on across the street. Rankin gives her this whole rigmarole blackmail of a story. He tells her he was a student in Geneva, and there was this girl. The night before he was to leave, they were on the lake, and she threatened to jump in if he didn't change his mind and marry her and stay there. Rankin says that the chick jumped in before he could stop her, unaliving herself. He tells Mary that Meineke is her brother and told him he'd be willing to say it was an accident if Rankin paid him off. Rankin says he gave Meineke all the money he had. Years went by, and he thought he'd never see Meineke again until he showed up there on their wedding day. Rankin said he was there again for money, and he gave Meineke all the money he had in the world, and Meineke left. This poor child believed him. She threw herself in his arms and hugged him, telling him he should have told her all this instead of carrying around this awful burden all by himself. He hugs her and kisses her, and "Oh, I love you so much." Then Mary has a thought. You know what? Sometimes just your little rational mind really does try to peek through before you dispel and poo-poo everything. And she asks Rankin this: why didn't he go back for his suitcase that he left at the general store? Rankin says that he supposes once he had the money, he could afford better. Then he tells Mary he's terribly nervous and he thinks he'll work on the clock alone for a while. She tells him she understands, and he walks her to the door. He offers to walk her home. It's late, but she tells him it's Harper. There's nothing to be afraid of. Girl, if you only knew. There's more kisses, some more I loves you, and she's gone. You know what? I don't even want to say something bad about Mary. She can't help herself. She only been married 3 minutes to this dude. She all up in love, and when you all up in love, sometimes you can't see your own hand in front of your face on a bright sunny day. Sometimes you can't. You know what, peeps? At the end of the day, I can't dog a sister out because to a certain extent, and I think to a great extent, and to many extents, it's a safety mechanism because she has to protect herself. And I'm not just talking about she has to protect her heart. This chick got to protect her whole mind and her whole psyche and her whole mental and emotional being. Because once you start going down the road of what this guy is telling me is not the truth, then you have to open your mind to a whole lot of horrible, horrible, horrible stuff concerning this man that you love so greatly and dearly, and you've turned around and married. So no, I can understand a sister saying, you know what, tell me this little story about this little chick that unalived herself. You know what, I'm not going to have a problem believing this. But going forward, baby, let's not keep secrets. Well, peeps, it's the next day, and now the hot mess is beginning to jump off. Red is unalived. Now, who of any of us is surprised? I knew Brother Man Dog's days were numbered when Noah said that dog was hanging out in the woods.
Poor old Red.
Why do you think he died?
Let's go and find out.
Wilson and Noah takes Red to the local doctor's office. Red was poisoned, and Wilson asked the doctor how long before the poison took effect. The doctor says no more than 10 or 15 minutes, and so Wilson surmises Red had to have been poisoned within a few hundred yards from where Noah found him. Wilson takes a leaf he's found on Red's paw, and the pair leaves the office.
What does the law say about this kind of murder? Is it the same as killing a man? It ought to be. It's just as bad.
Noah's a sweet kid. And real life can be a bear sometimes. Wilson is looking at that leaf he took off of Red. Dry leaves, he says, mixed with mud. Wilson states that Red had to have been digging somewhere in the woods. Noah asks, but for what? To which Wilson replies, a body. Meineke's body. Now the proverbial rope is tightening little bit by little bit, and eventually this trap is going to spring itself. Regardless of what Rankin does and how cagey he might be, Wilson is onto this dude, and he's not going to let this thing go. This dude is going to find his leg stuck in a bear trap, and Wilson is going to be the dude to have sprung it.
Just going on a search. What you after?
Found a machine oil. What search?
For the body. State police deputized half the town.
Mary comes home to find Rankin packing. He tells her he's leaving because he loves her. She tells him she meant her wedding vows, for better or worse, and he asks even if he offed Red. You couldn't have, she said. And then when she realizes that, yeah, he did, it was an accident, she says next. And Rankin tells her that no, he meant to off Red. Offing people can be a chain, he says. One link leading to another until it circles your neck. Red was digging up the grave, he says, of the man I offed. Yes, he is. The little man. You offed him, Mary says, almost not believing him. With these hands, Rankin says. Now are you satisfied and will let me go? Okay, you know what? Dude, what kind of game you playing? This chick can't keep you from leaving if you want to. You a Nazi, hiding in plain sight, fake name, fake life, fake everything. You're not gonna make me believe you love this chick so much that she can hold you there. Then he continues with this lie. When Mary asks him why he did it, he tells her this. His dreams were too high, grander. He knew that your father was a Supreme Court justice, and he'd do anything to protect his daughter from a scandal by paying a few $1,000s. Oh, Mary, he says, I should have gone away and lost myself in the world. Really? Dude. Oh, but I loved you. Sister girl, he punking you. And she tells him if one of us is going, we're both going. And then she asks the $64,000 question. What is there to connect you to that man? Nothing actually, is his response. You're the only one who knows that I knew him. Then you need have no fear, she says, if I'm the only one who can speak. He tells her that in failing to speak, she becomes part of the crime. And she tells him she's already a part of it because she's part of him. You know what? I want to choke my own self out. If I have to listen to this chick, he punking you. He don't love you. He don't care about you. If he cared about you, he would have been gone before you got to that house. If he cared. Chick, you being played. And this is a dangerous game you playing. Because at some point, he's gonna go from being this nefarious, calculating Nazi to going off the chain because he's backed up against the wall. Chick, he already offed twice. And both times to protect himself. He don't love you, girl. He testing you, girl. And the minute you start passing the test, you hit. Just saying. Just saying. Well, it looks like most of the town is turned out for the search for Meineke. And looking at what appears to be a body covered with a white sheet, we can assume that they found him. Now, let's look at what comes next.
What do we do about Mary? We can't leave her alone with him now, do we know? Well, she realizes now that whatever story he told her about Meineke was false. Noah, I think your sister should be ready to hear the truth.
I don't know, peeps. Unfortunately, Rankin is one step ahead. He's confessed to offing Meineke. You telling her he off this dude is not going to rattle or shake her. Now, this chick is liable to be a hard nut to crack because she's all about Team Rankin. Back at the house, the pair is just sitting with their own thoughts. Well, maybe Mary is sitting with her thoughts, but Rankin is eyeing this chick up and down. If she so much as flinches, he's gonna see it. The maid then calls out to Mary that her dad is on the phone for her.
Just a minute and I'll see. He wants me to come over.
Did he ask me to?
Said he wanted to see me alone.
Nothing unusual about a father wanting to see his daughter.
All right, Adam, I'll be right over.
Now this is becoming a hot mess. Don't let Rankin's apparent calm fool you. It didn't escape his notice that Mary's dad wants to see her alone. And don't let her saying the name Adam throw you. She often calls her dad by his first name. I think it's a thing between the both of them. After she's hung up the phone, she asks Rankin if that was strange. Rankin's playing it off, but look at Mary's face. If she wasn't already unnerved, this phone call has done it. Girl, you need to fix your face, because this dude ain't for play. He don't miss nothing. He don't miss a flinch. He don't miss a thing. He tells her that while she's at her dad's, he may as well go to the church, to the clock tower, to work on the clock. And she can come by and pick him up later. and she's just sitting there and shaking her head, and she whispers, "I'm so afraid." Chick, girlfriend, you know what? You need to keep some stuff to yourself. Use your inside voice for this. This dude is cold-blooded. He off Meineke. I don't care about some little sad song he gave you about blackmail. Girlfriend, you gotta be able to try to read between the lines. This punk off your dog. He off Red. He poisoned Red. He off an innocent dog that didn't have nary nothing to do with this. He off your dog, girl. Did you forget that? And this chick is sitting there and she's still talking. I wonder why he wants to see me alone. His voice sounded so different. Goodness, girl. Gee whiz, how old are you? 12? Don't you watch TV? Don't you go to the movies? Girl, please. This is a very common plot. Keep your mouth shut. Don't nobody love you so much that if you become a threat, he won't choke you out. He looking at you funny. He been looking at you funny all afternoon. And then what happens? This dude comes up, grabs her by the elbow, and yanks her up out of that seat. You know what you're going to say? Rankin says. She nods, and then she leaves, and he is eyeing her all the way to the door. Girlfriend, I don't know. You're going to have to come up with something. You're going to have to, girlfriend, come on. Come on. Girl, come on.
Is something wrong?
Mr. Wilson is here on a very serious matter. He wants to ask a few questions of you.
What do you want to know, Mr. Wilson?
Wilson gets right up when she enters the room, and he says to her, "You know about the body that was discovered?" And she says yes. And he asks her if she ever met him. Mary says no, and Wilson asks her if she's seen the body. Mary sits and says no. Then how can you be sure you never met him? Wilson asks. Then she asks him, "Mr. Wilson, do you suspect me of something? If so, what?" "Shielding a murderer," he says. Mary exhales a bit, like the very air had gone out of her. Then Wilson says that maybe a photograph might refresh her memory, and he takes it out and shows it to her, and of course, it's Meineke. Wilson says this is Conrad Meineke, a man in charge of one of the most efficient concentration camps. And Wilson says, "You know him, don't you? You've met him here in Harper." Mary shakes her head. No, I've never met the man." Then Wilson asks her dad to turn out the light. There's a projector on the table, and Wilson tells her, "I've been showing your father some films, and I want you to see them too." Wilson tells Mary that he's on the Allied Commission for the Punishment of War Criminals, and it's his job to bring escaped Nazis to justice. Mary tells him she's never even seen a Nazi, and Wilson tells her she may have unknowingly. They look and act just like everyone else. As the film is rolling, Wilson points out the specific horrors that people endured in these camps, how they lived, and the methods that were used to unalive them. Mary asks why he's making her look at this, and Wilson tells her that everything she's seeing was the product of one mind, the mind of a man named Franz Kindler. He was a brilliant mastermind of the Nazi Party, Wilson tells her, and a proponent of genocide and a master population. Wilson tells her that Kindler had a passion for anonymity. Therefore, no photographs of him were ever in the newspapers. And just before he disappeared, he destroyed all evidence of a Franz Kindler, down to the last fingerprint. He says there is no existing proof to the identity of Franz Kindler except one little thing, a hobby that amounts almost to a mania: clocks. So do a lot of people, Mary says, while you yourself. Wilson goes on to add that while in a Czechoslovakian prison, Meineke was awaiting being unalived. He was an executive under Franz Kindler, and as a result, they allowed him to escape on the chance he might lead them to Franz Kindler. And, Wilson says, Meineke led them there to Harper.
And here I lost him until yesterday. But unfortunately, Meineke was dead and buried.
And Wilson says, now in all the world, there's only one person that can identify Franz Kindler. And that person is the one who knows, who definitely knows, who Meineke came to see. Mary yells that my Charles isn't a Nazi, and she rushes out of the room and onto the balcony. Wilson follows her, and he says, you were at Rankin's house the day Meineke showed up. Did anyone come by while you were there? And this chick said, I don't remember. Are you kidding me? Really? Then Wilson tells her to think hard to remember. It's not so long ago, only 2 weeks. You were hanging curtains. No one came, Mary says. Were you alone all that time? Wilson asks. And Mary says no. Who else was there? Wilson asks. And this chick had the audacity to say Charles was there. He came right after his last class. Girlfriend, your own mouth has betrayed you. You know Meineke came by looking for Charles. And you know Charles did not come home after his last class. If you will remember, my people, he was choking out Meineke and kicking poor Red. She tells Wilson and her dad that she and Charles were together. You have nothing linking my husband with this man Kindler, except for wild suspicion, Mary is yelling. And she goes on to say that you're trying to use me to implicate him. You can't involve me in a lie, she said. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. Now, this chick is 2 minutes away from full-blown out hysterics. And she's yelling. It's all a lie. Who you yelling to, girl? Wilson? Your dad? No. You yelling is all a lie to your own mind, because all this is starting to break through. Mary rushes from the balcony and out of the house. Her father goes after her. She's running and he's calling out to her to stop. She completely breaks down and her dad tries to comfort her. He tells her that she has to face this thing with complete honesty. She has to tell him the absolute truth. He tells her that Wilson is right and she's innocently married a criminal. Mary refuses to believe it. Peeps, she can't believe it.
He's not a Nazi. He's not one of those people. He's not. Leave us alone.
Mary takes off running, and Wilson leaves the house and approaches her dad. Wilson tells Mary's dad that she has the facts now, yet she won't accept them. They're too horrible for her to acknowledge. Not that Rankin is Franz Kindler, but that she could give her love to such a man, that she could love such a creature. He tells her dad that they have one ally, and this ally is the truth, and it's too strong to be denied. Mary has made her way to the clock tower. The clock's bell is tolling, and the mechanical statues are circling around. Mary enters and climbs the stairs, calling out for Rankin. She's climbing the stairs and the clock is tolling the hour. Charles is on the landing and says to Mary, listen, after 100 years or more, it's working. Mary says to him,
It was a trap, Charles, just like you said. Mr. Wilson, he tried to tell me that you were a gnat.
Who did he say he thought I was?
A gnat? Franz Kindler.
and she's just running her little mouth, pleased as punch with herself. I didn't tell them anything, she says, not even father. I outsmarted them both. Then she says this, it will be simple enough for you to prove you're not Kindler, this Nazi. We'll just find someone who was in your class at college. They'll identify you. And that's all. That'll be to it, chick. Oh, God. Rankin says, if what you say is true, I'm safe. You won't say anything. Oh, Charles, I won't say anything, she says. I promise I won't. They can torture me, and I won't tell them anything. Look, sister girl, I don't even know you, and I know you'll fold like a house of cards at the least bit of pressure. You were practically hysterical 15 minutes ago. I don't know you, but this dude spent a year plotting and setting you up. And he's just looking at you. And then, my peeps, he nodded. He nodded, peeps. This dude is so gonna off you. Below, the citizens are arriving, having heard the clock tolling. They're running and talking, happy that the clock is working again. Rankin says we must go down and greet them, he tells Mary. And they need to see you smiling. Understand? And Mary replies, yes. They climb down the ladder where they're greeted by some of the townspeople. Potter and some others thanking Rankin, congratulating him, and some wondering if they'll get any sleep now with the clock working. Rankin and Mary pass through the crowd. Okay, well, Rankin is sawing the rungs of the ladder. Look, he knows he can't trust this chick. Not to Kay. Across the street, we see that Wilson is in his room smoking and looking out the window at the clock tower. He knows Rankin is going to have to knock this chick off. And there we have Rankin sawing away at his plot and his plan. Apparently, he's sawing just the one side of where the rung is connected. We can surmise that the least bit of weight is all it will take to dislodge the rung and cause the individual to fall to their demise. The following day, Rankin calls Mary after his last class at the high school. He's calling her from the payphone at the general store. He tells her something important has come up and she must come to the church immediately, up to the clock tower. He tells her not to tell anyone she's going to the tower and to leave her car at home and to come through the back door. Girlfriend, this dude's setting you up and you don't even know it, even though your daddy warned you, Wilson has warned you that he a bad guy. You just so tied up in this dude that you can't see the truth right in front of your face. Come on, peeps. I know we can get tied up in folks. I know we can get tied up in situations. But sometimes the only person that can save you or pull you out of something jacked up is you. It's you. You have to be able to turn off this emotional, I'm all tied into something, and let your rational man come through. If this chick would just think rationally, she would know not to trust this dude. I don't care how much you love him. You have enough information, enough facts to know he a bad guy. If your daddy and Wilson didn't convince you of that, when you were up in that tower with that dude after he fixed that clock, You should have been able to look at this dude and say, you know what? These little rose-colored glasses are off. And I am seeing you for the dude you are. You looking at me, and the way you looking at me ain't even right. You know what? I need to watch myself with you. Sometime you got to tell yourself the hard, fast truth. You know what? I need to be careful with you. Girlfriend, come on. After he ends the call, Rankin takes a seat to play checkers with Mr. Potter. He's seated right next to the big window, giving him a bird's eye view of the church and the tower. Just as Mary is about to leave, her beloved maid Sarah takes ill, and she will not leave her by herself. She calls Noah and tells him to please go and meet Charles at the clock tower. It's important. Tell him that Sarah has taken ill and she'll be there as quickly as she can. She tells Noah it's important and not to tell anyone where he is going or why. Like a good kid brother, he says okay and hangs up the phone. But then he stands a second and he thinks about that thing. And what does he do? Come on, peeps. He calls Wilson and tell Wilson what just went down. And Wilson said, come on, I'm gonna go with you. Now, that's how you do it, people. So Rankin is playing checkers and chit-chatting with Mr. Potter. Potter looks out the window and remarks that it looks like the weather is turning to snow. At the same time, we see Noah and Wilson walking together heading towards the church. Two townswomen come in, and Rankin turns to greet them. And while his attention is diverted, Wilson and Noah walk up, and they both enter the church. Rankin never saw them. The women remark to Rankin that he's there early, and Rankin responds that he dismissed his class 10 minutes early, and he's been sitting there playing checkers with Mr. Potter. Well, it sounds like this dude is setting up an alibi. Now, across the street, Wilson and Noah are climbing the ladder up the clock tower.
Golly, you can still smell the glue where he joined it.
After spending a good part of the afternoon with Potter, Rankin goes home. He enters the house, and Mary calls his name. Charles. Rankin freezes. He sees her, and his face is filled with shock and disbelief. He can't believe what he's seeing. It's like he's looking at a ghost. He walks closer to her, walking slowly, like he's waiting for her to disappear, for her to evaporate like a phantom. You didn't go to the church? No, Mary says. She tells him that just as she was leaving, Sarah had some kind of an attack, and she's resting now. I had to stay with her, Mary says. Rankin stares, as if he still can't believe she's standing right there in front of him. He turns to the grandfather clock to wind it. His hand is shaking. Mary asks, "What's the matter?" "Nothing's the matter," he says, yet his hand is still shaking. And she asks him, "Why did you want me to go to the church? You said it was important." "It was nothing," he says. "It's just the strain." He goes over to the sofa and sits, and she sits beside him and asks, "Well, what did you tell Noah?" He says, "When?" And she says, "Didn't you see him?" He asks, "Why should I have seen him?" And she tells him when she found out she couldn't leave Sarah, she called Noah and told him to go there. Rankin shouts at her, "I told you not to tell anyone." She says, "But it was Noah." He yells, Call him and tell him not to go. And she tells Rankin that she can't. She says, I talked to him over an hour ago. And then Rankin says this: if he dies, his blood will be on your hands.
What do you say? It's your meddling that's done this.
Did you kill no one?
Yes, and he goes to the church and climbs up that ladder.
You intended to kill, wasn't it?
No.
Why wasn't it I?
God, Kindler.
Yeah, baby, yeah! Yeah! Girlfriend, you was a stoop until your baby brother got tied up in this. Yeah, call him Franz Kindler to his face. Call it to his face. Oh, yeah! Girl, stand up! Stand up! She stands in front of him as straight and as brave as we've ever seen her. She stands in front of him straight and brave, people. Off me, she says, taunting him. Off me, I want you to. I couldn't face knowing what I've been to you. Come on, y'all, wife and lover, the whole bit, and knowing what you've done to Noah. But when you off me, don't put your hands on me. Girl, she gives him a firearm and thrusts it at him, yelling at him to use this. Yeah, you punk, you punk. She got you, you punk. Even if you off this chick, you are still the biggest loser. Okay, peeps. And just at the moment, at that very moment, we see a car pulling up outside. The front door flings open, and Wilson, Noah, the town doctor, her daddy, they all rush in. And we see the kitchen door swinging as if someone has just gone through it. Holy, come on. Alrighty. Oh, this thing is picking up now. Okay.
Operator, get me the state police.
Next, we find Wilson on the phone talking to the state police. He's confirming that the roadblocks are up, and he tells whoever he's speaking with that they're watching the train station and that Rankin isn't hiding in the woods. Mary is upstairs in bed, and the tolling of the clock wakes her up. She gets up out of bed and, still wearing her nightgown, she puts on her coat. And then we see her walking out of the house in the middle of the night. And she's carrying a box about the size of a shoebox. Okay, people. This is coming out of nowhere, so where are we taking this? I hope this chick hasn't gone over the edge, but you know what? I wouldn't blame her. She has come out of a 12-year haze, a 12-year lie. It is no telling what state this chick is in. The maid Sarah goes to check on her and finds her gone. Sarah rushes down the stairs yelling for Mary's dad. And her dad and her brother Noah rushes out of the house, with the dad sending Noah for Wilson and telling Noah that he'll be going for the police. All along, Mary is walking through the night. Noah reaches Miss Peabody's place where Wilson is staying, and he tells Wilson that Mary has disappeared. The first thing out of Wilson's mouth is the clock tower. Then Wilson says Rankin could be hiding there, and if she gets there before us, and he and Noah rush out of the room before Wilson can even finish the sentence. Now we see Mary climbing up onto the landing and then up the stairs, still carrying the box. Rankin appears and tells her not to move. He has a weapon in his hand. Mary tells him he doesn't need it, stating she's alone. He asks, "What are you doing here?" As he reaches his hand down to lift her up. He's holding her by the hand and pulling her up, easily able to let her go where she'd fall to her demise. And he asks her if she's telling the truth while holding her suspended. "Why should I lie?" she responds. Once he's pulled her up, he asks her if she was followed. She tells him she came through the cemetery and no one saw her. He takes the box from her and it's empty, and he flings it to the floor in anger. She says she needed the excuse, saying she was afraid he wouldn't let her up. And he says to her, "What do you want?" And she says, "I came to off you." And he shakes his head and says, "No, Mary, it's you who's going to end up getting offed." He says, "You were meant to fall through that ladder. You're going to fall now." And she says, "I don't mind if I take you with me." Dang! This child is grown and she is savage. She's not even sweating and she is not scared, people. This chick has been dragged to the end of herself and she is done with it. Then Rankin says, "You are a fool." He says this: "They searched the woods. I watched them. Like God watching a bunch of ants running around." Okay, he really thinks highly of himself. He says he'll hide in the woods because they won't search there again. And in a day or two, they'll think I got away on the train. Mary says when they find me, they will know that you are still here. Ooh, that child not scared at all. Then he says this to her: "You're on the verge of a breakdown. Why else would you leave your bed? Then you wind up at the church in the dead of night. Even a child could see that you offed yourself." Then Wilson comes busting through, saying, "Often folks is what led you here. It won't help you now." Rankin has the pistol out, and Mary is trying to wrestle it out of his hands. Rankin then slams her to the floor, and Wilson tells him to look out the window. "Look!" he yells at him. Rankin says, "Oh, that's an old trick." And Wilson shakes his head and tells him it's the citizens of Harper. "They've come after you. The plain little ordinary folks, the one you've been laughing at as Franz Kindler. Well, you can't fool them anymore." Rankin moves toward Wilson, and Wilson says, "Sure, you can off me and Mary. You can off half the people down there. But there will be no escape." Oh, now Rankin is sweating, peeps. "It's not true," he says. "It was their idea. I followed orders." Well, wait a minute. I thought you was the tough guy. I thought you were the big bad Nazi. And now here you are, sweating like you've been running a race. Talking about something was their idea and how you were simply following orders. "You gave the orders," Wilson says. I did my duty," Rankin said. "I'm not a criminal." Wilson karate chops the pistol out of Rankin's head, and they're both tussling for it. And it's Mary who picks it up, and she just starts firing the thing off. Rankin rushes and climbs further up the ladder while Mary is just firing away. I mean, that chicken shooting, aiming for that dude. He gets up on a higher walkway, and she's still firing and getting close to tagging him. Then Sister Girl goes two-handed on that pistol, and she tags him in the shoulder. Rankin is now sitting on an open ledge that opens out onto the roof. He leans and loses his balance, and he falls out. He's on the ledge now, right in front of the clock, and as you can see quite the dramatic end for Charles Rankin, aka Franz Kindler. All right, peeps. Mary has climbed down, and Wilson has just sat where he was. He says he needs a sturdier ladder. He ain't even trying to play with this ladder. He said, I'd already hurt my head, I hurt my ankle, I'm not going to fall down this thing. I need a stronger ladder. Potter tells him he'll go get him another ladder, and Wilson lights up his pipe and sits there and smiles. Well, there you have it, my peeps. The Stranger. This was one heck of a good story. And Orson Welles, the Rankin character, that brother man kicked it. And remember, he also directed this movie as well. I loved how he used shadows and dim lighting and camera angles to heighten the tension and to fuel the suspense in this movie. The shock of his split-second cruelty in choking out Meineke and then kicking that dog, who was surprised when Red turned up poison, or his plan to do away with Mary when he realized she was not going to be able to hold it together enough to protect him. That chick started crumbling because she was a decent person who turned into a beast when she thought that man hurt her brother. That chick didn't look back as she, stalked him and came for him with nothing but an empty box. Come on! That chick was gonna take that dude out even if it meant her going with him. She stood firing on that dude and not blinking an eye. And where did he end up? Crouching on the floor, sweating, and talking about how it wasn't him. He didn't do nothing bad. He was just following orders. And speaking of Mary, come on, Loretta Young, that chick played that thing. She made me proud. She was shattered, and then she became strong. Come on, who don't love that type of a character? And speaking of characters, Edward G. Robinson typically played gangsters. So it was great to see him playing a guy on the other side of the fence. And he did it well. If you kind of think about it, both Wilson and Rankin were the flip side of the same coin. Both intense, both relentless, both calculating, one good, one evil, and good, one out. And there you had Wilson at the end of this long chase, because remember he had to chase Meineke down first and then capture him and then try to figure out how to use him to get the big fish who was Rankin. There's no telling how many years this dude's been at this. And to see him at the end, taking a seat, waiting on them to bring him a good ladder he can climb down on, and him just taking a smoke and that satisfied smile on his face. Come on, my people, those are the kind of movies you want to watch. And you want to know something? These are the kind of movies that I want to share with you and explore with you. Yeah, okay, this movie lasted some bit over an hour. But you know what? Just if you look and if you see that the content is an hour or more, you know what? Plan it out. Because you will miss a gem if you don't see this. This is a great movie, and it is still standing the test of time. All right, people, that's all I got for you. I appreciate you so much. I love doing this. You know, can I even tell you that you guys bring purpose to me? Come on, I already told you I'm an old retired woman sitting around trying to figure out, okay, you know, what am I going to do And what can I do that's purposeful? I most assuredly am not getting a part-time job, okay? I work, I retired, I have my little fixed income. I'm sitting and enjoying my elder, if you will, but not so much, but elder years. And so, when I do this, when I meet you guys, you do. I have to honestly say that you really do get my life purpose because you give me something to do during my waking hours. Sure, I watch TV. Sure, I kick it with my family. Sure, I kick it with my retired sisters. And now I'm kicking it with you. And it's such great fun. So, my subscribers, I so appreciate you in ways you would not know. And as for those of you who haven't cast your bait in the water yet, come on, stick your toe in and subscribe. Everybody, please like and share and come back. That's all I got for you people. Be sweet to each other now. Until next time.